The gunshot that killed Martha Vance's father echoed through the canyon like a church bell tolling the end of innocence. And as she watched him fall from his horse, blood blooming across his chest like a terrible flower, she knew her sister Lily had finally gotten what she wanted. Martha stood frozen on the ridge above the narrow pass, her hands clutching the reins of her mare so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She had come looking for her father after he rode out suddenly that morning in March of 1875, his face troubled and his jaw set in that particular way that meant he was about to confront something unpleasant. Now she understood why. Below her, 3 men emerged from behind the rocks where they had been hiding, and one of them was helping Lily down from her own horse. Her sister's blonde hair caught the Nevada sun as she walked calmly to where their father lay dying in the dust of the trail. Martha wanted to scream, wanted to rush down there and cradle her father's head in her lap, but something primal kept her still and hidden. She watched through tears as Lily knelt beside him, saying something Martha could not hear. Their father raised one shaking hand toward Lily's face, perhaps in forgiveness or perhaps in accusation, and then his arm fell and he moved no more. The men with Lily worked quickly, going through their father's saddlebags and taking his gun, his money, even the silver pocket watch that had belonged to his own father. Lily mounted her horse again, and the group rode off toward the east, away from Unionville, away from the ranch that had been in the Vance family for 15 years. Martha stayed on that ridge until the sun began to sink, until she was certain they were gone, and only then did she ride down to her father's body. She was 22 years old and alone in the world now. Her mother had died giving birth to Lily 19 years ago, and Martha had helped raise her younger sister with all the love and patience she could muster. Lily had always been beautiful and charming, with a smile that could make men stumble over their own feet and a laugh like silver bells. But there had been something else there too, something cold and calculating that Martha had tried to ignore. Their father had seen it more clearly in recent months. He had told Martha just 2 weeks ago that he was changing his will, that he was going to leave the ranch solely to Martha because Lily could not be trusted with it. Lily must have found out somehow. Martha buried her father in the cemetery outside Unionville, paying for the coffin and the service with the last of the money she had saved from selling eggs and butter in town. The ranch was hers now, legally, but it was also mortgaged to the bank, and she had no way to make the payments without her father's help. She had 60 days to come up with $300 or lose everything. The ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Pete who had worked for her father for a decade, quit the day after the funeral. He would not meet Martha's eyes when he told her he had been offered a better position elsewhere. The 3 ranch hands left the next day, also claiming they had found work that paid more reliably. Martha knew what was happening. Word had spread that the Vance ranch was finished, and no one wanted to be there when it fell apart completely. She spent a week alone on the property, trying to keep up with the work of feeding the cattle and horses, mending fences, hauling water from the creek. Her hands blistered and her back ached, and at night she fell into her bed too exhausted even to cry. The cattle were starting to wander off through gaps in the fence she did not have time to repair. The vegetable garden her mother had planted years ago was being overrun with weeds. Everything was falling apart. On a Thursday morning in late March, Martha was struggling to lift a broken fence post when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She reached for the rifle she had started carrying everywhere, her heart hammering, terrified that Lily had come back to finish what she had started. But the rider who came around the bend in the road was not her sister. He was tall and lean, sitting easy in his saddle like he had been born there, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore dusty trail clothes and a battered hat, and there was a gentleness in his face that made something in Martha's chest loosen just slightly. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I am looking for work. Heard in town that the Vance place might be hiring." Martha almost laughed. "You heard wrong. I cannot even pay the hands I already had, and they all left." He looked around at the broken fence, the overgrown yard, the general air of neglect that had settled over the property in just 2 weeks. "Looks like you could use the help anyway. I just told you I cannot pay." "Room and board would be enough for now," he said, "and a share of the profits when you sell the cattle. I know you have got about 200 head out there, and they will fetch good money in California if we can get them there before summer." Martha studied him more carefully. "Who are you?" "Everett Hale," he said. "I have been working cattle drives for 5 years, worked ranches before that. I know this business, and I can see you are in trouble. Why would you work for free?" He was quiet for a moment, looking out over the property with an expression she could not quite read. "Because I know what it is like to lose everything," he said finally. "And because sometimes people need help, and it is the right thing to do." Martha wanted to refuse. She had learned hard lessons about trusting people in the past few weeks. But she also knew she could not do this alone, and there was something in Everett Hale's eyes that seemed honest. She made a decision that felt both reckless and necessary. "All right," she said, "but I am warning you, this place is a disaster and I do not know if we can save it." "Then we will find out together," Everett said, and he dismounted and tied his horse to the rail. For the next 2 weeks, Everett worked from dawn until well past dark, and Martha worked beside him. He was as good as his word, knowing cattle and horses and ranch work better than she had dared to hope. He fixed the fences she could not manage alone, rounded up the wandering cattle, repaired the barn roof that had been leaking since winter. He was patient when she did not know how to do something, showing her rather than doing it himself, and he never made her feel foolish for asking questions. In the evenings they sat on the porch and ate simple meals of beans and cornbread, and slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Everett told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about losing his parents and younger brother to fever when he was 18, about heading west because there was nothing left for him back home. He had worked his way across the territories, learning everything he could about cattle and horses, saving money with the dream of someday having his own place. Martha told him about her mother's death, about raising Lily, and trying to be both sister and mother to her. She told him about her father's strength and kindness, about the ranch he had built from nothing. She did not tell him yet about Lily's betrayal, about watching her sister arrange their father's murder. That wound was still too fresh, too terrible to speak aloud. But Everett seemed to sense there was more to the story. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after he had arrived, he said quietly, "Your father did not die in an accident, did he?" Martha's hand stilled on the plate she was washing. "What makes you say that?" "Because people in town get nervous when they talk about it, and because you carry that rifle everywhere and you jump every time you hear a horse coming." She set the plate down carefully and turned to face him. In the fading light, his face was serious and concerned, and she found herself wanting to tell him the truth. So she did. She told him everything about Lily and the ambush and the men who had helped her, about burying her father and losing all the ranch hands, about being alone and terrified and not knowing who she could trust. When she finished, Everett was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I am sorry. No one should have to go through that." "I keep thinking I should have seen it coming," Martha said, and her voice cracked. "I keep thinking I should have protected him somehow." "It was not your fault," Everett said firmly. What your sister did, that is on her, not you. She was my responsibility. I helped raise her. She made her own choices, Martha. Bad choices, evil choices, but hers. You cannot carry that weight. It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about the way he said it, gentle and certain, made the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally spill over. She cried standing there in the kitchen, and Everett did not try to stop her or tell her everything would be fine. He just stood nearby, solid and steady, and when she finally got control of herself again, he handed her a clean handkerchief without a word. After that night, something shifted between them. Martha found herself watching Everett as he worked, noticing the way he moved with easy confidence, the way he spoke gently to the horses, the way his rare smile transformed his whole face. She caught him watching her sometimes too, and the look in his eyes made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The 60-day deadline was approaching fast. They had the cattle in good shape, but they needed to sell them soon to have any hope of paying off the mortgage. Everett suggested a cattle drive to Sacramento, where the prices were better than anything they could get locally. It would mean being away for nearly 3 weeks, leaving the ranch unattended, but it was their best option. "What if Lily comes back while we are gone?" Martha asked. "What does she want that is still here?" Everett pointed out. "The land. She cannot claim it legally, not with your father's will leaving it to you. The cattle, we will have them with us. I think she got what she wanted, which was money and freedom from responsibility. I think she is long gone." Martha wanted to believe him, but she knew her sister better than that. Lily had always been jealous of Martha, jealous that their father trusted her more, that people in town respected her. Lily would want to see Martha fail completely, to lose everything and have nothing. But Everett was right that they had no other choice. They set out on a Monday morning in mid-April with 203 head of cattle and 2 horses each. Everett had hired 2 temporary hands in town, men he knew from previous drives who agreed to work for a percentage of the profits. They were rough-looking men named Jack and Tom, but they knew their business and they treated Martha with respect after Everett made it clear she was the owner, and what she said was law. The drive was hard work, harder than anything Martha had done before. They moved the cattle slowly westward through the Nevada desert, following the Humboldt River route that emigrants had used for decades. The days were getting warmer, and the cattle were restless, wanting to stray toward any hint of green grass or fresh water. Martha learned to ride for hours without stopping, to keep her eyes on the herd constantly, to read the signs of trouble before it happened. Everett rode beside her often, teaching her the skills he had learned over years of trail work. He showed her how to anticipate where the cattle would try to break away, how to turn them back without spooking the whole herd, how to watch for predators and dangers. He was patient and encouraging, and Martha found herself growing more confident each day. At night, they took turns keeping watch over the herd. On Martha's watch shifts, Everett often stayed awake with her, sitting by the fire and talking quietly so as not to disturb the sleeping cattle. They talked about everything and nothing, about their hopes and dreams, about the places they had been, and the places they wanted to go. Martha found herself laughing more than she had in months, found herself looking forward to those quiet hours in the darkness with only the stars above and Everett's presence beside her. One night, about a week into the drive, a group of 4 men rode into their camp just after sunset. They were rough-looking, with guns on their hips and hard eyes, and Martha's blood ran cold when she recognized one of them. He had been with Lily that day in the canyon. Everett stood slowly, his hand resting casually near his own gun. Jack and Tom positioned themselves on either side of the camp, suddenly alert. The lead rider, a man with a scar across his cheek, looked around at the cattle, and then at Martha with a smile that made her skin crawl. "That is a fine herd you have got there," he said. "It would be a shame if something happened to it." "State your business," Everett said calmly, but Martha could hear the steel in his voice. "No business, just being friendly, letting you know these trails can be dangerous. Lots of things can go wrong on a cattle drive. Stampedes, rustlers, all kinds of trouble. We can handle ourselves," Everett said. The scarred man's eyes moved to Martha. "You are Martha Vance, are you not? I heard about your father. Terrible thing, that accident." Martha's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "It was not an accident, it was murder, and I saw who was there." The man's smile faded. "That is a dangerous accusation." "It is the truth." There was a long, tense silence. The four men looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. Everett shifted slightly, his body positioned between Martha and the riders. Jack and Tom had their hands on their guns now, not pointing them but ready. Finally, the scarred man said, "You should be careful, Miss Vance. People who talk too much sometimes have accidents of their own. And people who threaten women on cattle drives sometimes find themselves on the wrong end of a rope," Everett said quietly. "There are 4 of you and 4 of us, and we are defending our property and our lives. How do you think that would look to a judge if it came to that?" Another long silence. Then the scarred man laughed, though it sounded forced. "Just friendly advice, friend. You folks have a safe drive now." They rode off into the darkness. Martha did not realize she had been holding her breath until they were gone. Her legs felt weak and she sat down hard on a log by the fire. "They will be back," she said. "Maybe," Everett agreed, "but not tonight. They wanted to test us, see if we would scare easy. Now they know we will not." He sat down beside her. "Are you all right?" I recognized one of them. "He was there when my father died." Everett's jaw tightened. "Then we will be ready. Jack and Tom are good men in a fight, and I have been in a few myself. We will keep extra watch tonight and stay alert. They will not take this herd." "Why are you doing this?" Martha asked suddenly. "You could have walked away the moment those men showed up. This is not your fight." Everett looked at her for a long moment, and in the firelight his eyes were soft. "Yes, it is," he said. "Because you matter to me, Martha. This ranch matters to me. What happens to you matters to me." Her heart was pounding again, but for an entirely different reason now. "Everett, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know I am not going anywhere. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Martha reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers as they closed around hers. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat like that for a long time, holding hands by the firelight while Jack and Tom kept watch and the cattle settled down for the night. Martha felt something blooming in her chest, something warm and bright and terrifying. She was falling in love with Everett Hale, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere when she needed help most, who had stayed when anyone else would have run, who looked at her like she was something precious and worth protecting. The men did not come back that night or the next. They kept moving westward, crossing into California, driving the cattle through the mountain passes and down into the Sacramento Valley. The journey took 17 days in total, and by the time they reached the cattle pens on the outskirts of Sacramento, Martha felt like she had been transformed. She was leaner, tougher, more confident. She knew how to handle cattle and horses, knew how to read the land and the weather, knew she could survive hardship and come out stronger. The cattle sold for good money, better than they had hoped. After paying Jack and Tom their shares and covering the drive expenses, Martha had $420. It was enough to pay off the mortgage with money left over for supplies and hiring some help for the ranch. She held the bank draft in her hands and felt tears prick her eyes. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved the ranch. That night, Everett took her to a restaurant in Sacramento, a real restaurant with tablecloths and candles and food that someone else had cooked. Martha wore the only dress she had brought, a simple blue cotton that was wrinkled from being packed in her saddlebag, and she felt suddenly shy and out of place among the well-dressed city people. But Everett looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the room. "We should celebrate," he said, ordering steak and potatoes and fresh bread. "You saved your ranch, Martha. You should be proud." "We saved it," she corrected. "I could not have done this without you. You are stronger than you think. You would have found a way." They ate and talked, and for a few hours Martha let herself forget about Lily and the men who had threatened them, let herself just enjoy being here with Everett. After dinner, they walked along the river, watching the last light fade from the sky. "What will you do now?" Martha asked. "You said you wanted your own place someday. You have money saved and you earned a good share from this drive. You could find land of your own." Everett was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" "No," Martha said, and she was surprised by how immediate and certain the answer was. "No, I want you to stay. If you want to, I mean. The ranch is still a lot of work for one person and I could use a partner. A real partner, not just a hired hand." "What kind of partner?" Everett asked, and there was something in his voice that made her heart race. Martha stopped walking and turned to face him. The river flowed behind them, silver in the moonlight, and somewhere in the city, a piano was playing. "The kind of partner who has an equal say in decisions," she said. "The kind who shares in the profits and the losses. The kind who—" she hesitated, suddenly afraid, but made herself continue. "The kind who might someday share in everything." Everett's face broke into a smile, the full, transformative smile she had seen only a handful of times. "Martha Vance, are you proposing a business partnership or something more?" "I do not know," she said honestly. "I just know that I do not want to imagine my life without you in it. I know that over these past weeks, you have become the most important person in my world. I know that when I think about the future, I see you there beside me." "I see you too," Everett said softly. He reached up and touched her face, his hand gentle. "I have been seeing you since the day I rode onto your property. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you told me you could not pay me, but looked ready to fight the whole world anyway." "I think I started falling in love with you when you stayed," Martha whispered. Everett kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Martha felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. She had never been kissed before, had never let any of the young men in Unionville get close enough to try. But this felt right, felt like coming home after a long journey. She kissed him back, pouring all her hope and fear and love into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Everett rested his forehead against hers. "I will stay," he said, "for as long as you will have me. And when you are ready, when we have had time to be sure, I want to marry you, Martha. I want to build a life with you, build that ranch into something amazing, have a family together. I want everything." "I want that too," Martha said, and she was crying and smiling at the same time. "I want all of it with you." They stayed in Sacramento for 2 more days, taking care of business at the bank and buying supplies for the ranch. Everett insisted on buying Martha a new dress, a beautiful green one with lace at the collar, and a proper hat to replace the battered one she had been wearing. They walked through the city like any other courting couple, holding hands and making plans for the future. The ride back to Unionville was slower and easier without the cattle. Jack and Tom had headed off to another job, leaving Martha and Everett to make the journey alone. They talked about what they wanted to do with the ranch, about buying more breeding stock, about building a bigger house someday when they could afford it. They talked about what kind of wedding they might have, small and simple in the church in Unionville, with just a few friends as witnesses. They talked about children, about how many they wanted and what they might name them, and Martha felt her heart growing fuller with every mile. They arrived back at the ranch on a warm afternoon in early May. Everything looked just as they had left it, peaceful and quiet. Martha paid off the mortgage the next day, walking into the bank in Unionville with her head held high and handing over the money that meant her ranch was truly hers now, free and clear. The banker looked surprised to see her, and even more surprised when she told him about the successful cattle drive. Word would spread quickly through town. Martha Vance was not defeated after all. They spent the next weeks working on the ranch, making improvements and repairs. Everett built a new chicken coop and fixed the roof of the main house. Martha planted vegetables and herbs, bringing the garden back to life. They hired a hand named Bobby, a young man fresh from Kentucky who was eager to learn ranch work, and he proved to be a hard and willing worker. In the evenings, Martha and Everett sat on the porch as the sun set over the Nevada hills, and they talked and planned and dreamed. Sometimes, Everett would play a harmonica he kept in his pocket, simple tunes that drifted across the property. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the stars come out. Martha had never been happier. 2 months after their return, on a hot July afternoon, Lily came back. Martha was in the garden when she heard the sound of a buggy coming up the road. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her blood turn to ice when she saw her sister's blonde hair. Lily was driving the buggy herself, dressed in a fancy traveling suit that must have cost more than Martha made in 6 months. She looked prosperous and confident as she pulled the buggy to a stop in front of the house. Everett came out of the barn, alerted by the sound. He moved to stand beside Martha, and his presence gave her the courage to step forward as Lily climbed down from the buggy. "Hello, Martha," Lily said, smiling as if nothing had happened, as if she had not arranged their father's murder and disappeared with his money. "I heard you managed to save the ranch after all. I am impressed." "What do you want, Lily?" Martha asked, her voice cold. "Is that any way to greet your sister? I came to see you to talk about our situation." "Our situation? There is no our situation. You killed our father." Lily's smile faded slightly. "I did not kill anyone. Father died in an unfortunate robbery, that is all." "I was there," Martha said, her voice shaking now with rage. "I saw you. I saw those men ambush him, and I saw you take his money and ride away. You arranged his murder, Lily. You killed him for inheritance money you were not even going to get." Lily's face went hard. "You cannot prove that." "I can testify to what I saw." "Your word against mine, dear sister. And who do you think people will believe? The bitter, jealous older sister or the sweet younger one who is heartbroken over her father's death?" Lily's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Besides, even if they believed you, which they would not, those men are long gone. I have no idea where they went." "What do you want?" Martha asked again. "My share of the ranch, of course. Father's will left everything to you, which was terribly unfair, but I am willing to compromise. Give me half the value of the property and we will call it even. I will go away and you will never see me again." "You already got your share," Martha said. "You took Father's money and his horse and everything else you could steal. You have no claim on this ranch." Lily's eyes flashed. "This ranch should be half mine. I am his daughter too. You gave up any claim when you had him killed." "I told you you cannot prove that." Lily stepped closer, and there was real venom in her voice now. "Give me what I want, Martha, or I will make your life miserable. I will spread rumors about you all over town. I will tell everyone you are unstable, that you are making up wild accusations, because You cannot handle running the ranch alone. I will tell them you have been living here alone with that cowboy. She gestured dismissively at Everett, with no chaperone, no propriety. Do you think the good people of Unionville will respect you then? They will respect the truth, Everett said quietly. Lily laughed. The truth. The truth is whatever people believe, and I have always been very good at making people believe what I want. Martha felt a cold, clear rage settle over her. She looked at her sister, this woman she had raised and loved and tried so hard to help, and she saw a stranger. She saw someone who cared only for herself, who would destroy anyone who stood in her way. No, Martha said clearly. You will get nothing from me, Lily. This ranch is mine, legally and morally. Father wanted me to have it because he knew you could not be trusted, and he was right. You are not welcome here. Leave now and do not come back. Lily's face twisted with fury. You will regret this, Martha. I swear you will regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner, Martha said. The only thing I regret is all the years I wasted trying to be a good sister to someone who was incapable of caring about anyone but herself. Now leave. For a moment, Lily looked like she might argue further, but something in Martha's face must have convinced her it was useless. She turned and climbed back into the buggy, jerking the reins hard enough to make the horse toss its head. You have not heard the last of this, Lily called as she drove away. I will find a way to take what is mine. They watched until the buggy disappeared down the road. Martha was shaking, and Everett put his arm around her shoulders. Are you all right? He asked. I do not know, Martha said honestly. She is going to try to hurt us, Everett. She is going to do everything she threatened. Let her try. The people in town know you, Martha. They know you are honest and hardworking. They will not believe lies about you. You do not know Lily. She can be very convincing. Then we will face it together, Everett said firmly, just like we have faced everything else. Over the next weeks, Lily did exactly what she had threatened. She took a room at the boarding house in Unionville and began spreading her poison. She told anyone who would listen that Martha was mentally unstable, that she was making wild accusations about Lily being involved in their father's death because she was jealous and angry. She wept prettily when she talked about how much she missed her father, how terrible it was to be accused of such awful things by her own sister. Some people believed her. Martha saw it in the way certain women at the general store would not meet her eyes, in the whispers that stopped when she walked by. But more people did not believe her. They had known Martha and her father for years. They had seen her work hard to save the ranch, had heard about the successful cattle drive. They knew she was honest and steady, and they were suspicious of Lily's sudden return and her dramatic claims. The minister at the church, Reverend Parson, came out to the ranch one afternoon to speak with Martha. He was an older man, kind-faced and thoughtful, and he had known her family since they first arrived in Unionville. I wanted to hear your side of things, he said gently. Lily has been saying some troubling things, but they do not match the Martha I have known all these years. So Martha told him the truth, all of it. She told him about watching Lily arrange their father's murder, about the men who had helped her, about Lily's attempts at blackmail and extortion. She told him about falling in love with Everett, about how they planned to marry as soon as it was appropriate. Reverend Parson listened carefully, and when she finished, he nodded slowly. I believe you, he said. I have watched Lily over the years too, and I have seen the coldness in her. Your father came to me a few months before he died, troubled because he suspected Lily was involved with some unsavory men. He was planning to change his will to protect you and the ranch. I think he knew something like this might happen. Can you help us? Martha asked. Can you tell people the truth? I can tell them what I believe, and I will, Reverend Parson said. But Martha, You know as well as I do that some people will believe what they want to believe. The best thing you can do is continue living your life with integrity and honesty. The truth has a way of coming out in the end. He was right. Over the following weeks, Lily's influence in town began to wane. People saw that Martha was not acting like someone unstable or unhinged. She continued working the ranch, continued being kind and honest in her dealings with everyone. She and Everett announced their engagement in August, and Reverend Parson agreed to marry them in September, which was a respectable amount of time after her father's death. Lily left Unionville in mid-August, disappearing as suddenly as she had reappeared. Martha heard through the town gossip that she had taken up with a gambler from Sacramento and gone east with him. A part of Martha felt sad for the sister who might have been, for the relationship they could have had if Lily had been different. But mostly she felt relief that this chapter of her life was finally closing. The wedding took place on a beautiful September morning in 1875. Martha wore the green dress Everett had bought her in Sacramento, with wildflowers in her hair. Everett wore a new suit, dark and handsome, and when he saw Martha walking toward him down the church aisle, his face lit up with such joy that she started crying before she even reached him. They spoke their vows in front of Reverend Parson and a small gathering of friends from town. Bobby was there, grinning widely, and several of the townspeople who had supported Martha through the difficult summer. When Everett kissed her as the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Martha felt like her heart might burst with happiness. They held a simple reception at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. It was nothing fancy, just friends gathering to celebrate, but it was perfect. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Everett took Martha's hand and led her away from the house, out to the ridge where she had once stood and watched her father die. "I know this place has bad memories," he said, "but I want to give you a new one." He pulled her close, and they danced there on the ridge with no music but the wind in the grass, and Martha felt the old pain being replaced by something new and precious. She had lost so much, had been betrayed by someone she loved, but she had also found something beautiful and real. She had found Everett, had found strength she never knew she possessed, had found a way to survive and even thrive. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Everett said, "and you do not have to be scared. I am not going anywhere. We are building something here, Martha, something that will last." They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, which Everett had filled with candles and wildflowers. He was gentle and patient with her, and Martha felt herself falling even more deeply in love with this man who had become her husband, her partner, her family. They talked late into the night, making plans and promises, building their future with words and dreams and hope. The years that followed were good ones, full of hard work and growth and love. Martha and Everett built the ranch into one of the most successful in the territory. They added more cattle, bought better breeding stock, built a new barn, and expanded the house. They hired more hands as the operation grew, and Everett proved to be an excellent manager as well as a skilled cowboy. In the spring of 1877, Martha discovered she was pregnant. She told Everett one evening as they sat on the porch, the same porch where they had spent so many evenings falling in love, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with delight. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "Martha, we are going to have a family." "We already are a family," she said, smiling. "But yes, we are going to have a baby. Are you ready for this?" "I have been ready since the day I met you," Everett said, and he kissed her with such tenderness that she started crying happy tears. Their son was born in December of 1877, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Thomas Everett Hale, after Everett's father and brother. Holding him for the first time, looking down at his tiny face, Martha felt something shift inside her. This was what family really meant. Not blood alone, but choice and love and commitment. Everett had become her family when he chose to stay and help her. Now baby Thomas was their family, born from their love and their partnership. Everett was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. He sang to him at night, walked the floor with him when he fussed, talked to him constantly even though Thomas could not yet understand words. Martha would watch them together and feel her heart swell with gratitude for this life they had built. 2 years later, their daughter arrived. They named her Rose Marie, and she had Martha's dark hair and Everett's eyes. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Martha and Everett spent those early years in a happy exhaustion of raising 2 small children while running the ranch. Bobby had become their foreman by then, having learned everything Everett could teach him about cattle and ranch management. He hired good hands and managed the day-to-day operations, which freed up Everett to spend more time with his growing family. The ranch prospered, year after year, becoming known throughout Nevada for quality cattle and honest dealing. Martha never heard from Lily again. She received word in 1880 that her sister had died of fever in St. Louis, and Martha arranged for a simple burial. She mourned the sister Lily might have been, but she could not mourn the woman Lily had actually become. She had made her choices, and they had led her down a dark path. Instead, Martha focused on the family she had chosen and the family she and Everett were creating together. In 1881, another son arrived whom they named James. In 1884, twin daughters, Helen and Grace, completed their family. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children running and playing, of the everyday chaos of a large and loving family. On their 10th anniversary, Everett took Martha back up to the ridge at sunset. The children were with Bobby and his new wife, giving the couple a rare evening alone. They stood looking out over the ranch that had grown so much, over the land they had fought so hard to keep. "Do you remember the day we stood up here after our wedding?" Everett asked. "I remember every moment we have shared," Martha said, leaning against him. "I told you we were building something that would last. I was right, was I not?" Martha laughed. "You were right. We have built something amazing, Everett. Not just the ranch, but our family, our life together. I never imagined I could be this happy. When I rode onto your property that day looking for work, I never imagined any of this either," Everett said. "I was just a drifter looking for my next job. But I saw you there, struggling with that fence post, looking exhausted and determined and so damn brave, and something in me just knew. This was where I was meant to be. You were who I was meant to find." "I am so glad you stayed," Martha whispered. "I will always stay," Everett said. "For the rest of my life, however long that is, I will be right here beside you. You are my home, Martha. You and our children, this ranch, this life we have built together. You are everything." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the ranch spread out in the gathering darkness, solid and real and theirs. The house where their children slept, the barns full of horses and cattle, the land they had worked and nurtured and protected. It was everything Martha's father had dreamed of when he first came to Nevada, and more than she had ever imagined for herself. She had been betrayed by the sister she trusted, had lost her father to greed and violence, had nearly lost everything she held dear. But she had survived, had fought and worked and refused to give up. And in the process, she had found something more valuable than any inheritance. She had found Everett, this cowboy who had become her partner, her husband, her everything. He had become the family she deserved. And together they had built a legacy of love and strength that would endure for generations. As they walked back down to the house hand in hand, Martha thought about how life could surprise you, how the worst betrayal could somehow lead to the greatest blessing, how losing one family could lead to finding another, better one, how sometimes the person you needed most appeared exactly when you needed them, offering help with no expectation of reward, offering love without conditions or limits. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and work and family. Thomas grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Rose became a skilled rider who could handle cattle almost as well as her father. James showed an aptitude for numbers and business, keeping the ranch books with meticulous care. The twins, Helen and Grace, were inseparable and full of mischief, keeping everyone on their toes with their schemes and adventures. In 1890, when Martha was 37 and Everett was 43, they added a library onto the house. Martha had always loved to read, and she wanted her children to have access to books and education. She ordered volumes from San Francisco and Sacramento, building a collection that became the envy of the territory. In the evenings, the family would gather in the library, and Martha would read aloud while the children listened and Everett worked on ranch accounts or repaired tack. Thomas announced in 1892 that he wanted to marry a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Sarah who had been helping her father at the general store. Martha and Everett gave their blessing gladly, and the wedding was held at the ranch with half the town in attendance. Watching her son exchange vows with the woman he loved, Martha squeezed Everett's hand and felt the circle of their life together closing in the most beautiful way. The following year, Sarah gave birth to Martha and Everett's first grandchild, a boy they named after Martha's father. Holding her grandson for the first time, Martha wept with joy and sorrow mixed together. Her father had never gotten to see any of this, never met his grandchildren or great-grandchildren. But in a way, he was here in the ranch he had started, in the legacy he had left, in the name of this tiny baby who represented the future. Rose married in 1895, choosing a young rancher from a neighboring property, and James followed suit 2 years later, bringing home a schoolteacher from Carson City. The twins declared they would never marry, that they were going to stay together on the ranch forever, but Martha and Everett just smiled. They had time to change their minds. By the turn of the century, the ranch was a thriving operation that employed 15 people year-round. Martha and Everett had become respected elders in Unionville, sought out for advice and wisdom. They had helped establish a proper school in town, contributed to building a new church, and supported young people trying to start their own ranches and businesses. On their 25th anniversary in September of 1900, their children threw them a grand party at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over Nevada and California to celebrate. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat, and Martha felt overwhelmed by the love and joy surrounding her. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had gone home and the grandchildren were asleep, Martha and Everett slipped away to their favorite spot on the ridge. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms looking out over their kingdom. 25 years, Martha said softly. A quarter of a century. Do you have any regrets, Everett? Not a single one, he said immediately. You. Martha thought about it, really thought about it. She thought about Lily and the betrayal that had nearly destroyed her. She thought about her father's death and the hard years of struggle. She thought about all the work and worry, the sleepless nights with sick children, the droughts and harsh winters and market crashes they had weathered together. No, she said finally, not one regret, because all of it, even the hardest parts, led me here. led us here. And I would not change a moment of it if it meant losing what we have now. I love you, Martha Hale, Everett said, using the name she had carried for 25 years now, the name that meant she belonged to him and he to her. I have loved you since the beginning, and I will love you until the end. I love you too, Martha said. More than I ever knew it was possible to love someone. You saved me, Everett. When I had lost everything, when I was alone and scared and did not know how to go on, you appeared and you saved me. We saved each other, Everett corrected gently. You gave me a home and a purpose and a family. You gave me everything I had been searching for without even knowing I was searching. We built this life together, every step of the way. They stayed on that ridge until the moon rose high and the air grew cold, talking and remembering and making promises for the years still to come. They talked about watching their grandchildren grow, about someday passing the ranch on to Thomas and his brothers, about growing old together on the land they loved. The years proved them right. They did grow old together, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved them and carried on their legacy. Martha's hair went silver and Everett's face became lined with age, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect, and the knowledge that they had chosen each other every single day. In 1915, on a warm spring morning, Everett had a heart attack while working in the barn. He died quickly, without pain, with Thomas and James beside him. Martha was in the garden and came running when she heard the shouting, but by the time she got there, he was gone. She held his hand and wept, and her children wept with her, mourning the loss of this good man who had been the foundation of their family. The funeral was the largest Unionville had ever seen. People came from 3 states to pay their respects to Everett Hale, the cowboy who had built an empire with honesty and hard work, who had raised fine children and treated everyone with dignity and respect. They buried him on the ridge overlooking the ranch, the place where he and Martha had stood so many times over the years. Martha lived for 5 more years after Everett's death, years that felt both endless and far too short. She missed him every moment of every day, felt his absence like a physical pain. But she also felt his presence in everything around her, in the ranch they had built, in the faces of their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the legacy of love and strength they had created together. She told their story often in those final years, wanting the younger generations to understand where they had come from, what had been sacrificed and fought for to give them the life they had. She told them about being betrayed by the sister she trusted, about watching her father die, about nearly losing everything. And she told them about the day Everett rode into her life, looking for work, offering help with no expectation of reward. He became the family I deserved, she would say, her voice soft with memory and love. When I had lost everything, when I thought I was completely alone, he appeared and he stayed. He chose me and I chose him, and together we built something beautiful. That is what family really means. Not just blood, but choice. Not just love at first sight, but love that chooses to stay day after day, year after year, through good times and hard times. That is what endures. Martha died peacefully in her sleep in January of 1920 at the age of 67. They buried her beside Everett on the ridge, and the whole town mourned the loss of this remarkable woman who had overcome betrayal and hardship to build a legacy that would last for generations. The ranch continued under the management of their children and grandchildren, prospering through the changing times. The original house was preserved and expanded, and the library Martha had loved so much was maintained and grew into one of the finest private collections in Nevada. The story of Martha and Everett became part of local legend, told and retold as an example of love and determination, and the power of choosing the right partner. On the ridge where they were buried, their grandchildren placed a simple marker. It read, Martha Vance Hale, 1853–1920, Everett Hale, 1847–1915. They chose each other and built a legacy of love. And on clear nights when the stars were bright overhead and the wind whispered through the grass, people swore they could feel the presence of that love still lingering on the ridge, eternal and unbreakable. A testament to the power of two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a life that would echo through generations, proving that the family you choose can be the family that saves you, and that true love, once found, never really dies.